She was just another face in the crowd, the quiet girl in seat 14A, blending into the background as if she were part of the very air around her, barely noticed by anyone, invisible in the way that some people choose to be when the world seems too loud and chaotic. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, a subtle frame for eyes that were anything but ordinary eyes that seemed to take in everything, from the smallest twitch of a classmate's hand to the faintest flicker of movement outside the window. She rarely spoke, and when she did, it was measured, deliberate, carrying a precision that made people pause, even if only for a fraction of a second. Most assumed she was shy, or perhaps just uninterested, but the truth was far more intricate. She kept her head down, hunched over her notebook as though the pages themselves were a shield against a world she did not yet trust. Her pen moved constantly, leaving trails of careful observations, cryptic sketches, notes in shorthand that seemed indecipherable to anyone else, but were pieces of a puzzle only she could see. There was a rhythm to her movements, a subtle discipline that hinted at training or experience beyond her years, a meticulousness that made even the most organized peers look careless by comparison. She had a routine, a pattern that she never broke. Every morning she arrived at the same time, took the same seat, and arranged her belongings in exactly the same order, notebook to the left, pen aligned at a precise angle, backpack tucked neatly under her chair. Her gaze often wandered toward the horizon, beyond the windows that framed the distant mountains and the stretch of airfield where military jets sometimes roared by, their engines sending tremors through the ground. Most students ignored the sound, regarding it as nothing more than background noise, a distraction from the mundanity of lectures and hallways, but for her it was a symphony of possibility. She listened with intent, a subtle smile playing at her lips when she heard the faintest whine of a turbine or the sharp, commanding bark of a pilot's voice over the radio. It was as if the jets spoke directly to her, conveying a language she alone could comprehend, a rhythm she could anticipate. The hum of jets in the distance barely registered to the world around her, but to her it was a signal, a whisper of things to come, and she absorbed it like sunlight, letting it energize her, sharpen her focus, and prepare her for the challenges she knew were waiting. To the casual observer, she seemed ordinary, perhaps even unremarkable, the kind of student who would be forgotten by the end of the semester. She smiled rarely, laughed even less, and had few friends, yet there was a magnetic quality about her stillness, a sense of quiet authority that drew attention even when she tried to hide. People would sometimes glance at her notebook, curious about the spiraling notes and symbols, but she never revealed their meaning, only offering a polite shrug or a soft, enigmatic smile. The classroom, with its clatter of keyboards, whispers, and the occasional burst of laughter, seemed to fade around her as if she existed in a parallel rhythm, synchronized to a beat only she could hear. She noticed everything, the way the sunlight caught the dust motes in the air, the subtle tension in a teacher's voice when a question went unanswered, the almost imperceptible changes in the faces of her classmates as the day wore on. Nothing escaped her attention, and she recorded it all, meticulously cataloging details that seemed trivial but were, in truth, components of a far larger understanding she was quietly constructing. Yet there was more than observation to her presence. There was a quiet readiness, a latent intensity that hinted at experiences far beyond the ordinary life of a student. The way she sat, shoulders squared, spine straight, eyes scanning, suggested someone accustomed to waiting, to calculating, to anticipating. She had an inner discipline, a regimen that was invisible to the untrained eye, but unmistakable to anyone who had ever known the rigor of preparation. Every glance, every pause, every turn of her pen was deliberate, each motion executed with purpose and precision. There was a calmness to her, a steadying force that contrasted sharply with the chaos around her, and though she gave no indication of it, she carried the weight of knowledge and skill that few could imagine. Perhaps it was the hours spent alone in study, or the countless nights awake while others slept, but she exuded a quiet mastery of herself and her environment, a readiness that could not be feigned. Her mind was always working, connecting dots invisible to others, building frameworks and strategies in silence. While others chattered and laughed, she analyzed, predicted, and rehearsed possibilities in her head. Every conversation was an equation, every observation a clue, every detail a potential advantage. And above it all, there was an undeniable sense of destiny in her posture, in her focus, in the way she carried herself with the kind of quiet intensity that made it impossible for those who noticed to look away. The world might have passed her by, might have ignored the quiet girl in 14A, but she was paying attention, storing every sound, every sight, every fragment of knowledge like a treasure map, waiting for the moment when all the pieces would come together. The distant roar of jets, the low vibration through the floorboards, the hum in her ears, these were not distractions but calls to action. Each thrum of an engine resonated with something deep inside her, stirring a determination that lay beneath her composed exterior. She imagined the cockpit, the controls, the precision maneuvers, the teamwork required in high-stakes environments where a single mistake could mean disaster. She practiced in her mind, running simulations, anticipating responses, noting variables, mastering her craft in the theater of thought long before she would ever step into reality. It was as if the airfield beyond the windows whispered secrets to her, secrets she alone could hear, preparing her for a moment the rest of the world could not yet comprehend. Though she appeared small, unassuming, and fragile to casual observers, there was an undeniable force within her, a quiet strength, an unyielding resolve, a readiness for something extraordinary. She did not seek recognition or applause. The idea of being noticed was almost irrelevant to her. What mattered was the preparation, the discipline, the invisible work done in the shadows, the accumulation of knowledge and skill that would one day manifest in a moment of impact so profound that no one could ignore her. The quiet girl in seat 14A was not merely waiting for life to happen. She was preparing to shape it, to take control, to rise from the anonymity of the classroom into a world where her presence would be felt, her actions respected, her voice finally heard. And though nobody in that crowded room suspected it, the hum of jets in the distance, the subtle vibrations of the world around her, and the meticulous records in her notebook were all part of a destiny she had been silently crafting for herself, a destiny that was about to unfold in ways no one could anticipate, transforming the quiet observer into a force impossible to overlook. The day began like any other at the sprawling airbase, sunlight glinting off the sleek surfaces of the F-22 jets as they lined the tarmac, their engines rumbling softly, a low, powerful hum that promised speed, precision, and danger all at once. The pilots went through their morning checks, helmets clasped tight, gloves adjusted, fingers brushing controls with the casual familiarity of routine, each movement rehearsed, each procedure memorized to the point of instinct. Their radios buzzed intermittently with chatter, mostly mundane communications, instructions, and confirmations. But as the jets taxied to the runway and prepared to ascend into the wide open sky, there was an undercurrent of anticipation in the air, a tangible tension that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of engines waiting to roar. The sky above was a perfect canvas of pale blue scattered clouds drifting lazily, unaware that it would soon be filled with the whirling precision of cutting-edge fighter jets, each one carving invisible paths in the air as though painting a secret, intricate pattern meant for those who could comprehend it. And then it happened. The radio, which had been a steady backdrop of routine communication, crackled sharply, producing a sound that sliced through the ambient noise like a razor, drawing attention from every cockpit, every pilot, and every crew member on the ground. An unfamiliar voice emerged, one that was calm yet undeniably authoritative, precise yet unshakably confident, a voice that carried the kind of weight only experience and unshakable focus could impart. There was no hesitation, no fumbling, no need for repetition. Every word was deliberate, every instruction exact. And then came the call sign, a single word that seemed almost mythical in its delivery, Shadowhawk. A word that made heads turn, that drew eyes from instruments, that made even the most seasoned pilots pause mid-check, as if their ears had betrayed them. For in that moment, the quiet girl from seat 14A, the one who had gone unnoticed in classrooms, who scribbled quietly in her notebook while others laughed and whispered, had entered their world, not physically, but through her presence in command, her voice transforming the air into a realm of precision and possibility. The pilots couldn't believe it, disbelief mingling with a rush of adrenaline as they realized that this was no ordinary coordination, no casual guidance from a control tower. This was the work of someone who understood the sky, someone whose mind mapped the complex choreography of flight with clarity and foresight, someone whose instructions were not just followed, but trusted implicitly, as if every word carried an unspoken assurance that each maneuver, each turn, each rise and dive through the clouds, would be executed with perfection. The words came steadily, weaving through the radio waves, guiding formations, adjusting spacing, anticipating turbulence, calculating angles of ascent and descent, all with the uncanny accuracy that suggested years of experience, compressed into a calm, measured tone. Ground crew looked up in awe, exchanging glances that mixed astonishment with incredulity, for they knew every pilot in the squadron, knew the rhythm of commands, knew the voices they would expect to hear, and yet this one was different, distinctive, commanding respect through nothing more than clarity, confidence, and an almost instinctive understanding of the complex ballet unfolding above them. Meanwhile, in the sky, the jets responded as if the voice were another sense, a sixth perception guiding them through invisible vectors and silent air currents, shaping the patterns of their flight with a precision that made even the most experienced pilots acutely aware of their own limitations. They glanced at each other, incredulous, sharing brief expressions behind visors, eyebrows raised, nods that conveyed both recognition and a touch of awe, because this was more than skill. It was artistry, strategy, intuition, and courage converging in the calm, steady voice that identified itself only as Shadowhawk. Every command was a lesson in timing, in anticipation, in spatial awareness, and in trust that had to be given in an instant, without hesitation, without question. And yet, despite the complexity of the maneuvers, the sheer speed and force of the jets slicing through the air, the voice remained unflappable, unhurried, a beacon of control amid the chaotic beauty of high-speed flight. It was as if the quiet girl from 14A, the one who had once sat silently taking notes in classrooms, had been waiting for this moment all along, silently preparing, honing her mind, building mental maps and simulations, practicing precision in thought and action so that when the opportunity arose, she could step into the world of elite pilots and command not with aggression, but with clarity and confidence. And as the formation spiraled, twisted, and executed maneuvers that seemed almost impossible to achieve, the pilots began to realize that the voice they had initially doubted, the voice of mysterious Shadowhawk, was not merely guiding them, it was anticipating their every movement, predicting their reactions, shaping the sky around them with a mastery that seemed almost superhuman, a silent conductor, orchestrating a symphony of jets and air. Back on the ground, spectators and instructors alike watched in stunned silence, some holding their breath, some exchanging odd whispers, all united in the recognition that something extraordinary was unfolding. The quiet girl, long overlooked, had transformed into a presence that demanded attention, her call sign a symbol of precision, courage, and intellect that could not be ignored. Every pilot felt it, the trust, the focus, the clarity, and the sense that they were not merely following instructions, but participating in a carefully crafted demonstration of skill and insight, a ballet of human ingenuity and technology in perfect synchrony. By the time the maneuvers concluded, the realization had settled in like a quiet storm. The girl in 14A was not just a student, not just an observer. She was a strategist, a leader, and a force whose intellect and courage had carved a place for her in a world she had long watched from afar. And as she spoke her final instructions, calm and deliberate, guiding the jets back to the ground with flawless precision, the pilots, the instructors, and everyone who had witnessed the unfolding events could not help but marvel at the paradox. The quietest person in the room had just commanded the most powerful machines in the sky, leaving a legacy of awe, respect, and the unmistakable promise that this was only the beginning of what Shadowhawk was capable of achieving. Now airborne, the pilots moved with a precision that bordered on instinct, their eyes scanning instruments and horizons, while every nerve hummed with the exhilaration of speed and altitude. Yet at the center of this controlled chaos was a voice that guided them with unwavering authority, a voice calm, measured, and impossibly confident: Shadowhawk. They followed her instructions as though she were an extension of their own consciousness, each maneuver executed with a synchronicity that seemed almost supernatural, the jets twisting and turning through the sky in perfect alignment, banking and diving with fluidity and grace that made the movements of lesser pilots appear clumsy by comparison. Every command she gave was decisive, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation, and yet there was a subtle artistry to it, an almost imperceptible layering of strategy that revealed itself only as the formation responded in flawless choreography. Each pilot felt an uncanny sense of connection, as if they were not separate machines piloted by individual minds, but rather fragments of a single entity moving through air and space, bound by the quiet authority of a strategist who had anticipated every possible scenario, every potential disruption, and had a solution ready before any problem could even manifest. As the F-22s executed complex rolls, high-speed passes, and sharp ascents, it became evident that Shadowhawk was more than a mere call sign. It was a reputation crystallizing in real time, a legend taking shape in the clouds, a name that would be whispered with awe by those who witnessed her precision and respected by those who sought mastery over the skies. The pilots, many of whom had been trained rigorously for years, exchanged fleeting glances behind their visors, silent acknowledgments of disbelief and admiration, recognizing that they were participating in something extraordinary, a performance that required not just skill, but an almost preternatural awareness of timing, distance, velocity, and coordination. Each maneuver carried subtle nuances that revealed her genius, a fraction of a second earlier here, a slightly sharper tilt there, and the formation's symmetry was restored, turbulence countered, angles optimized, energy preserved. It was a dance of engineering and instinct, where each pilot became both performer and instrument, responding to cues that seemed invisible yet were orchestrated with an unerring precision only the keenest strategist could deliver. Meanwhile, back on the ground, instructors and peers who had initially dismissed the quiet girl in seat 14A as shy or unremarkable began to witness a transformation that was nothing short of revelatory. Binoculars and monitors captured the elegant arcs of the jets, the near-impossible precision of maneuvers executed without hesitation, and slowly the murmurs of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Whispers grew louder. "Is that her? No way, she's just a student. Look at how the formation responds." It was as if the air itself had acknowledged her presence, bending to her commands, yet she was not grandiose, not dramatic. There was no flourish, no ego-driven display, only the quiet, steady cadence of authority and intellect manifesting through action. Her mind operated with the focus of a master chess player, calculating multiple steps ahead, predicting the reactions of both pilots and environment, considering wind, momentum, spatial relationships, and potential hazards simultaneously while maintaining a calm tone that reassured rather than demanded. She embodied a paradox, serene yet commanding, youthful yet experienced, quiet yet impossibly influential. As the jets streaked across the sky, executing formations that would challenge the capabilities of seasoned pilots, those who watched began to reevaluate their assumptions, acknowledging that skill and courage were not always announced with bluster or bravado. Sometimes they arrived wrapped in silence, observed in stillness, and revealed only when the moment demanded it. Every twist, every coordinated climb and descent, Every subtle adjustment of throttle and trajectory carried with it evidence of her strategic mind, a testament to hours of preparation, observation, and mental simulation that had quietly gone unnoticed until now. Even as adrenaline coursed through the veins of the pilots, heightening senses and sharpening reflexes, they instinctively trusted her decisions, relying on her judgments implicitly. There was no second guessing, no questioning, only a fluid, unspoken harmony born from the recognition that Shadowhawk's vision extended beyond what their own eyes could perceive. And in that moment, as the formation executed an intricate series of rolls, vertical climbs, and split maneuvers with the kind of precision that left spectators awestruck, a shift occurred in perception. The girl they had once overlooked was now revealed as someone capable of commanding not just machines, but respect, admiration, and loyalty. The crowd on the ground felt it too, a palpable energy that seemed to emanate from the sky itself, a collective realization that the quiet observer, the one who had sat silently in classrooms taking meticulous notes, had harnessed her intellect, her observation skills, and her composure into a force that could shape events in real time, influencing outcomes with clarity and confidence. Each movement of the aircraft told a story, a narrative of preparation and talent, a testament to the hours she had spent studying patterns, analyzing strategy, and anticipating every possible variable. And as the formation leveled out, gliding back toward the base with flawless synchronization, the pilots could no longer contain their astonishment, feeling an almost reverent gratitude for the guidance of Shadowhawk, a young strategist whose quiet presence had transformed their flight into a masterclass in precision, teamwork, and trust. Instructors, peers, and even casual observers began to whisper her name with a mixture of admiration and disbelief, understanding that this was more than an exercise or demonstration. It was the birth of a reputation, the emergence of someone whose intellect and courage had proven itself under the most demanding conditions. The girl they had assumed was timid, reserved, and unremarkable had, in a matter of moments, demonstrated a level of composure, foresight, and tactical brilliance that would be remembered long after the jets had returned to the ground, engines winding down, and the sun dipped toward the horizon. Her call sign was now synonymous with mastery, her presence with calm authority, and her actions with the unmistakable imprint of someone destined to leave a mark far greater than anyone had imagined. Every participant, from the pilots in the air to the observers on the ground, carried with them the awareness that the quiet girl in 14A had revealed a truth about potential, about skill, and about courage, that it does not always announce itself in loud or obvious ways, that brilliance can lie dormant in silence, and that the most profound impact often comes from those who have quietly prepared, observing, calculating, and waiting for the moment to reveal their true abilities. And as the last jet touched down and rolled to a stop, the realization was unanimous and unspoken: Shadowhawk had arrived, and the legend of the quiet strategist from seat 14A had only just begun to take flight. When the exercise finally came to an end, the jets descending gracefully toward the tarmac, engines winding down with a low, vibrating hum that seemed to echo the intensity of what had just occurred. The pilots could hardly believe they were back on solid ground. For hours they had flown in perfect formation, executing maneuvers that would have challenged the most experienced aviators, guided entirely by a voice that was calm, commanding, and precise. Voice of Shadowhawk. Now, as the roar of the engines faded into the distance, and the airbase returned to its usual rhythm of clanking tools, radio chatter, and routine checklists, the anticipation in the air was palpable. The pilots climbed from their cockpits, helmets removed, visors lifted, revealing faces flushed with adrenaline and eyes still bright with the residual excitement of flight. They looked toward the source of the extraordinary guidance, toward the quiet girl who had sat unnoticed in seat 14A in classrooms, whose presence had always been easy to overlook, yet whose intellect and courage had orchestrated their entire performance with the skill of a master strategist. She stepped forward, removing her headset with a soft, fluid motion, fingers brushing hair from her face as if she had been carrying the weight of the sky itself, and now allowed herself a moment of Simple humanity. A smile curved her lips, gentle, almost shy, betraying none of the intensity that had guided the F-22s through intricate formations, none of the command that had transformed her voice into an instrument of absolute control and respect. There was an uncanny juxtaposition between the quiet, almost timid demeanor she now displayed, and the extraordinary competence she had demonstrated mere moments before. She was in that instant both ordinary and remarkable, a study in contrasts, a young woman whose calm presence had inspired trust, whose precision had demanded respect, and whose courage had commanded not just aircraft but admiration. The pilots approached, some in awe, some still grappling with disbelief, each step tentative yet brimming with a desire to acknowledge her achievement, to connect the voice they had trusted implicitly with the person now standing before them. Words faltered on their lips, gestures became awkward in the presence of someone whose competence far exceeded their expectations, and yet in the silent exchange of glances and subtle nods, acknowledgement was complete. The quiet girl in 14A was gone, replaced by a strategist, a leader, a force whose presence could shape events and inspire those around her. Instructors who had observed from the ground, monitors still flickering with images of flight paths and formations, gathered closer, whispering among themselves, unable to hide the astonishment in their expressions. They had expected a standard exercise, routine coordination, perhaps minor deviations corrected through typical channels, yet what they had witnessed defied all preconceived notions of ability, intuition, and poise. Shadowhawk had not simply directed pilots, she had transformed the very exercise into a masterclass in strategy, teamwork, and composure under pressure. Conversations sparked in low murmurs. "She's brilliant. How did we not notice her before? That level of foresight, it's beyond training." And in the midst of these whispers, she remained composed, quietly confident, letting her actions speak far louder than words ever could. It was not arrogance, not a desire for recognition, that had guided her through the skies, but preparation, discipline, and an almost instinctive understanding of how to command both machines and respect. The pilots who had flown under her guidance were still processing the experience, replaying in their minds every climb, every turn, every split-second adjustment that had been flawlessly communicated, realizing that their trust in her had been absolute, and that trust had been earned not through showmanship, but through sheer competence and clarity of thought. Even those who had doubted her at first, the ones who might have assumed that a quiet demeanor equated to inexperience, now felt a deep, undeniable respect, understanding that brilliance often hides behind stillness, and that courage and skill do not always announce themselves with noise or bravado. As she shook hands, exchanged nods, and answered the occasional question from the instructors or curious peers, it became clear that Shadowhawk's impact extended beyond the skies. It was now tangible, personal, and immediate. Every gesture, every carefully measured word reinforced the impression that she was someone capable of extraordinary leadership, someone whose intellect and calmness in chaos made her not just a participant, but a natural guide. A figure around whom others could rally in moments of pressure or uncertainty. The legend of Shadowhawk did not require embellishment. The evidence was in the executed maneuvers, the flawless coordination, and the way pilots instinctively moved as one under her guidance. And as she stood there, bathed in sunlight filtering across the tarmac, a quiet smile lingering, it was impossible for anyone present to separate the myth from the reality. The quiet girl who had been invisible in classrooms had revealed herself as a force of nature, an individual whose skill and courage could not be ignored, a young woman whose presence would now be remembered and revered. From that day forward, the call sign Shadowhawk became more than a designation over radio frequencies. It became a symbol, a testament to the idea that the quietest people often carry the greatest strength. The ones who observe, prepare, and wait for their moment are sometimes those who leave the deepest impact, and that intelligence, courage, and discipline manifest in ways that can transform ordinary moments into extraordinary legacies. Stories of her calm, precise guidance and flawless strategy circulated quickly among pilots and instructors alike, spreading through ranks as an example of what preparation, focus, and a steady mind could achieve. Each retelling amplified her legend, inspiring awe and motivating others to reevaluate assumptions about who could excel, who could lead, and who could change the course of events without fanfare or attention-seeking. Even among peers who had known her for months or years, the revelation was profound. The girl who had taken notes quietly in the corner had not been idle. She had been learning, observing, and readying herself for a moment that would reveal the true extent of her capabilities. And as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the runway and reflecting off the polished surfaces of the jets, there was a sense of completion, of closure, but also of beginnings. Shadowhawk had arrived, her presence marked not by loud declarations or dramatic gestures, but by the quiet, undeniable proof of her abilities and the respect she had earned from those at the pinnacle of their field. The pilots she had guided carried with them a renewed sense of possibility, a reminder that skill, patience, and preparation could transcend expectation, that courage often manifests in silence before it announces itself in action, and that leadership is as much about listening, observing, and calculating as it is about giving orders. For the young woman herself there was a subtle satisfaction, a quiet pride that needed no applause, no recognition beyond the acknowledgement in the eyes of those who had flown under her guidance. She had stepped out of the shadows of anonymity, not to boast or demand attention, but simply to perform with excellence, to prove to herself and the world that preparation, focus, and courage can create ripples far beyond what anyone expects. And as people began to leave the airbase, carrying with them the memory of a flight that had transcended mere training, the legend of Shadowhawk took root, destined to grow with every telling, a lasting reminder that sometimes the most profound impact comes not from the loudest voices, but from the quietest ones, the observers, the strategists, the ones who wait, prepare, and act when the moment calls for brilliance. From that day forward, her name became synonymous with mastery, respect, and quiet authority, a symbol of how intelligence, courage, and focus, combined with preparation and restraint, could create a legacy that no one could overlook, a legend that would inspire generations of pilots and observers alike. And so the quiet girl in 14A was gone, replaced forever by Shadowhawk, a figure who embodied the truth that sometimes the most extraordinary people reveal themselves not through noise, attention, or spectacle, but through actions, precision, and the courage to step forward when it matters most, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it.